It's time again for the Throttle Up Leadership Podcast with Dr. John Dentico. The mission of our podcast is to provide 21st century leadership training for a talent-driven world. We help organizations implement strategies and practices designed to attract, hire, engage, and retain top talent while mitigating the effects of burnout. Our guests are experts in various fields of organizational dynamics, including, but not limited to, leadership, management, communication, and coaching. They bring a world of knowledge and solutions to our viewers and listeners. I am sincerely grateful for their participation and ideas. So let's dive in. And if you enjoy our podcast, please like, share, and subscribe. We genuinely appreciate your support. Hello again and welcome to the Throttle Up Leadership Podcast. I'm Dr. John Dentico, your host. With me today is Sean Martin. Sean is a healthcare entrepreneur and a commercial real estate investor. He grew up in the turbulent Bronx's housing projects amid the height of New York City's crack epidemic, from which he emerged as a beacon of resilience and ambition. He was raised by a single mother who inspired him to consciously work hard amidst daily challenges of drugs, alcohol, and crime. He went to university and worked in the corporate world where he, as he likes to say, left him uninspired and just surviving to pay the bills. At the age of 29, Sean served 2 years in prison and today acknowledges that it was the best blessing in disguise and the best thing that ever happened to him. He used his time in prison to rebuild himself and manifest the next decade of his life through reading, writing, and reflection on his life, and absorbing lessons from self-development books. His journey from adversity to success as an entrepreneur, founding multi-million-dollar marketing, event planning, and real estate businesses, stands as a testament to his determination. More than just a business success, he passionately underscores the pivotal roles that mentors and role models play in shaping destinies. Sean is a husband and father of 2, and I am truly pleased to have him here today on this podcast. Hello, Sean. How are you this morning?
I am excellent, Doc. Thank you for that beautiful introduction. I greatly appreciate it.
You are most welcome. You've earned it, buddy. You've earned it. Sean, as I like to say, let's get down to business, as they say. So let me ask you this question. You've had a very powerful journey. To say that is truly an understatement. What are the 3 most important lessons you learned on the way to where you are today?
First and foremost, what jumps off the page at me is belief. I just think that without it, there is no possibility for success. There is no possibility of escaping such turbulent upbringing or such shortcomings. So essentially, belief is the end all be all of putting you on that path to whatever it is that you want to do. And growing up in those turbulent times and in that kind of environment, at the time, it's just normal. It doesn't seem like there's anything off. This is life. This is what you know to be day-to-day life. It's not until later that you understand the lessons that are being presented to you. And those can either be followed to go down the wrong path or to go down the right path. So for me, belief was instilled at an early age. My mother read me a children's book called The Little Engine That Could. And in it, there's this undersized engine that needs to get the toys up the hill. And all the bigger industrial trains pass these toys by and don't want to give them the time of day. And here comes this raggedy little blue engine that could, and it gets these toys up the hill. And it does it through sheer willpower. I think I can, I think I can, I think I can. And it's slowly chugging its way up the hill. This is something so seemingly pointless in a children's book that was read to me probably no later than 4 or 5 years old. But the lesson there is the only thing that I can say separates me from so many of the same people that I grew up with who didn't have the drive or didn't make it out. It was the belief that I could, the belief that I was meant for more. And along the way, there are other lessons that come. And my mother's work ethic to get up every day and go to a job that she didn't necessarily love, but she did it because she needed to put food on the table. And being the product of a single mother household in a housing project in the Bronx, times weren't beautiful by any stretch of the imagination on the outside looking in from somebody who had more, but they were beautiful to us because the lessons were there. The belief was instilled. The work ethic was instilled. Despite many of my neighbors being generational welfare recipients, people that had their parents were on welfare and therefore they were on welfare and they didn't really strive to do much else. I had the luxury of having a mom who got up every day and had to cover both roles of a mother and a father. And because she was only one income, we really couldn't escape the gravity of poverty. And our neighbors were probably doing just as good on welfare as she was as a single mom, but yet and still, she went to work every day. And I think that was invaluable in my ability to just know that if I want something, I'm going to have to work for it. It's not going to come to me. It's not going to be gifted to me. And there's no check coming on the 1st and the 15th. Like so many of my neighbors and friends were trained and brought up to thrive for, which was a small governmental check. I was taught to get up and work for whatever it is that you wanted. And then lastly, love is the end all be all cure for sadness, depression, adversity. You can put all those environmental strains on a person or in a household, but if there's love, there's safety, there's security, there's a place that you can always come back to that is going to nurture you, make you feel secure, and just allow you to hope for better. Without that love, as I saw so many of my friends grow up without, it's just much harder and a much deeper hole to dig themselves out of. So I was fortunate enough to be instilled with 3 core values at an early age and 3 life lessons which will follow me till this day, which is belief. Without it, there's no chance of success. Work ethic, for without it, those beliefs and dreams will never come into fruition. And then the third is love, because ultimately that is what separates human beings from most other animals on the planet. Our ability to love and care deeply, not only about people, but about issues and ideas. And that is what essentially created this amazing society that we're blessed enough to live in. If you look up at any skyscraper in New York City, where I'm from, someone loved the idea of architecture and the idea of changing a skyline for history to acknowledge. And those 3 things I think are universal lessons that anybody can benefit from. And I was fortunate enough to have at an early age.
It's interesting listening to you. It calls a lot of things in my mind. One of the things, and I, as you well know, in our workup, we're both New York boys.
Yes,
You
sir.
grew up in the Bronx. I grew up in Manhattan on the East Side when it was not the safest place to live. And I got to tell you that one of the things that just immediately came to mind as you were talking, and as you said, this is life. This is what we know. We didn't know anything different in those days as we were growing up. And I've talked to several of my previous, when we talk about this notion of fight or flight, you know, a lot of people talk about fight or flight. And I said, there's a third one that people don't really think much about. I said, of course, when you can't run, you can't flight or you can't fight. It is what it is. There's another one that you learn, I think I learned too, and that's called uh, stick to itiveness or dig in, as I like to say. You learn how to endure. You learn how to deal with things every day, get up every day and just deal with it. And without, if I dare say, without a sort of a victim mentality, you just, it is what it is. And you just deal with it. And I think that's certainly one of the most important lessons I learned growing up in New York without any confusion about that. So I appreciate that. That was a great answer, and I appreciate that. Let me ask you this question. Since a lot of my work and has always been involved in leadership, I want to ask you, how would you characterize in your mind the idea of leadership? And what do you think it takes to be a leader in the business world of today?
Leadership takes intention. It takes someone who may have reluctantly been called into that role. And oftentimes, the great leaders that we admire in history and in storytelling and even in movies are called to action, not because they want to go out and lead. Those almost never make the best leaders, right? The guy that wants to be at the front, getting the attention, calling the arms. It's always the reluctant leader who has been either worked over, wronged, taken advantage of, or just been plain beat up at some point. So I think great leaders have been beat up. They've taken the bumps, they've taken the bruises, they've seen the adversity, they have the stick with itness, as you mentioned. Those make for great leaders. I think experience is one of the best teachers, and I think great leaders carry with them great experiences. Now, those can happen over a prolonged period of time. So there could be someone who worked their way up in a corporate setting or in any career setting over the course of after 10 years, they were promoted, and the next 5 years, they were promoted, and then 2 years later, they were promoted. And that's considerably rank and file kind of leadership growth. But then there's people who, like myself, maybe you had a skill set that you realized early, but you didn't have the bumps and the bruises. You didn't have the life experience to give you the confidence to step into the role of leadership. So I think that a great leader in a corporate setting is or has the same values and things that make them up as great leaders in a non-professional setting. That could be the leader of a home. That could be the leader of a community. That could be the leader of a sports team. It's usually somebody who, through stacking wins and through taking chances and failing, has a resume. They've built up a resume of sorts, or they've built up the resilience that now has given them the confidence to say, okay, I have enough to take care of myself, but I have all this leftover. I have all those reserves. What am I doing with that? I think that men in particular, and I'm speaking as a man and from my own experience, we could blame society all we want. I just had an amazing conversation with a colleague of mine centered around being raised in a single mother household. Stepping into the leadership role of a man and a father and a husband in my own life has been a challenge because I didn't have the life experience. I didn't have the blueprint laid out for me. You have reluctant leaders, you have natural born leaders who may have been raised around a structure that has taught them how to then go on, conquer whatever they were looking to conquer, and then move into leading other young people. So coaches in sports are a great example. Let's take a single parent household. Let's take a great athlete who doesn't have that father figure, doesn't have that guidance, but they've got talent to spare. Now they run into a high school coach or a junior high school coach that does have the tools that they're lacking. And then they share those tools with that talented individual who now has that available to them. And I'm just using the metaphor of sports because that's a nice, organized way to describe what we're discussing. But the truth is, most people don't have that structure or that leadership leg up. And I think all of us have a leader in us, whether we're male or female, whether or not we have the confidence to step into that role of leadership is solely dependent on how life has unfolded for us and how we've perceived those things that have happened to us and whether or not we're going to use them to grow and grow stronger. So I think leadership is a universal term and it covers a wide swath, and there's leaders in all different industries. But I think there's a few characteristics, such as we just discussed, which is life experience, bumps and bruises, confidence, and also doing it with others in mind. The greatest leaders are the ones that have the other people in mind, their staff, their families, their children, their wives, their communities. They're first, meaning the leader knows they're going to be good. They have the bumps, the bruises, they have the skill set, they have the resume, so they have the confidence to know that no matter what's going to happen to me, I'm going to be okay. Now, let me give these reserves to do something greater. And that almost never involves themselves. It involves lifting others up.
That's a great point. Couple of things come to mind. Number one is that, and you talk about the bumps and the bruises. I think one of the determinations a leader has to make is, to say it simply, is because of what they've been through. In a sense, they've had enough. They've had enough of the way things are, and they seek to make a difference. They want to make a change. But in doing that, and this is something I learned at a very young age, there is a price to pay for leadership. People think you stand up and become a leader and everything is just great after that. Oh, everything's going to come your way. No problem. You got it. It's all done. No, that's when the real challenge begins. That's when the real tasking takes on the risks of taking on being a leader and doing leadership things, practicing leadership with a group of people, creating this collaborative. And as I like to say, and mostly in the business world, for me, it's about creating an environment where people come to do their best work every single day. So I'd love to get your reflection on that idea of the price that it pays to do leadership.
You touched on something that I hinted at, but didn't really elaborate on. And the cost is such a simple but beautiful way to put it. The cost of leadership. That cost involves your selfishness going out the window. For me personally, I was a reluctant leader because I was selfish. I still wanted to feed my own desires and my own need for ego driven things or tasks or accomplishments. And that was a big cloud of smoke, which was, again, there was nothing physically keeping me from stepping into that role of leadership, but that fog and haze wasn't allowing me to see the other side of myself, the leadership side of myself. And that's because I was still feeding the child, the warrior, so to speak. Men can be classified as knights or warriors, pages, or they can be kings. And it's often described that in order to reach that level of kinghood, you have to go through a tunnel. You have to go through a life of, or at least a piece of your life, which is spent in darkness. It's spent in the darkness of your own mind and your own soul and your own heart. And not necessarily everybody can see it. And in the traditional male sense, we hide that pain. We hide the fact that we're hurting. But it's only that pain, that discomfort, that confusion, that uncertainty that allows us to then say, I've had enough. And then eventually have the courage to step into that role of leadership. And it's not until we come out of that tunnel and that we put others first that we can thrive as leaders. We may pop out and we may say, okay, I want to give this king thing a try, not knowing all that it entails. But then you get hit on the head or you run into some adversity, and a lot of people will go back into that tunnel and say, no, this isn't for me. Because leadership is essentially you taking on the responsibility of caring for others. And that can be in any sense, whether it's in a family sense, in a corporate sense, in a team sports sense. Everything lives and dies with the captain of that team or the leader of that team. When an NFL team loses or come from behind loss where they had a nice cushy lead, the quarterback is going to be the guy that's in front of those microphones, not the defense that allowed all that extra scoring at the last quarter. It's the quarterback because they're the leader of that team. And that's what leadership is. It's taking responsibility for those that you have signed up to lead. And no great leader is made without struggle, and no great leader is made without sacrifice. How much you're willing to sacrifice is up to the individual. And I think some of the greatest leaders that the world has ever seen have sacrificed the most. And that could be in any area of their life that we don't see on camera or for all to display. There's plenty of people that are in our minds, cult pop icons or the Elon Musk of the world, who we all know for this, what we see, what's presented to us, what they're trying to accomplish in the world. But we don't know the story of struggle or who's suffering as a result of that person giving their leadership to the world. Is it their children? Is it their significant other? We don't know that. We just saw it play out with Tom Brady, greatest quarterback of all time. Within, I don't know, less than a year of being retired, his entire family life changed dramatically. So now we know for sure that in order for Tom Brady to be Tom Brady, there was a sacrifice being made, and it was in his marriage. And that is one public example of something that I think leaders struggle with and have as a challenge when they step into that role.
It's interesting you talk about this tunnel, the tunnel that I think most leaders travel. Leaders who intend to make a difference, not those leaders who we see too often who are just members of the club, as I like to say. They just make their way, become the yes men, if you will, and make their way through an organization. But the people who really make a difference. And you talk about the tunnel, and to me, it's a cleansing. Okay. It's clearing away the stuff that doesn't matter and focusing on what needs to be done in order to achieve change, for example, significant change. And that cleansing, one of the best metaphors I've ever heard about that was, as I understand it, a question posed to Michelangelo. So he was asked one time, how do you create these amazing pieces of sculpture? And his response was, there already exists in the marble. The sculpture's there inside the marble. All I do is knock the other pieces off. So in many respects, I like to think of one's journey through life as knocking off the pieces that are not to be there in order to reveal the beautiful sculpture. So it's a very interesting idea and very interesting way of expressing it, that there is this cleansing period. There is a cost to being a leader, a price a leader pays. I appreciate that very much. Let me move on
Yeah,
to it. Let me move on to another subject. Can you describe what you mean by empathy and how important do you think empathy is in today's workplace?
I think we're seeing a movement in today's workplace where empathy is at the forefront of creating a culture, quite honestly. In a family, there's empathy. And in a work culture, there should be a family structure, which should, to some degree, in my humble opinion, follow the same teaching, which is that we do care about you. We do feel for you. We do understand that these things that are happening outside of these four walls is impacting your ability to show up within these four walls. And I think we're in a time where feelings are not stuffed down like they used to be. And I think it's a hard pill for a lot of old school, rank and file people who have been brought up in a different culture to grasp. I am 46 years old, so I'm in a little bit of an in-between phase between whatever Gen Z, X, I don't even keep up with those things. But I do know that the internet came around as I got a little older. So it's not going to impact or revolve. My life doesn't revolve around it as much as somebody who was brought up where iPhones were already available to them at the age of 6 or 7 years old, or my children for that matter. So I think empathy and understanding where another individual is coming from is paramount. And as a leader, if you can have empathy for your troops, for lack of a better term, your employees, that just makes you a better leader. I'm not saying that you need to be their therapist. I'm not saying that work should be used as a place of therapy. But the culture that's been promoted and instilled by a lot of these tech companies, which are examples for the change in greater corporate structures, I believe, that started happening in the late 90s and 2000s, where you have these West Coast mindsets. You have a lot of young people that are driving these companies, and they started building the corporate structure and the corporate home base around these belief systems where we want work to be a place where people feel comfortable. And I think empathy is the key factor there, because if you don't care what the employee feels like, if you don't care about what their experience is while they're working for you, creating value for you and your company, then you're out of touch and you're out of time and or out of the times. Your thinking is not a reflection of the times. And to bring it full circle, as someone who's 46 and in this in between phase of generations, as I like to consider it, I always like to say when older gentlemen or older people approach me and say, this generation's lazy, this generation doesn't like to work, I frame it as what this generation figured out that putting in 40 or 50 years of their life to a company that doesn't care about them and then sends them on their merry way for a minuscule pension and social security, which won't exist when they hit that age anyway. Maybe they just got smarter. Maybe they just didn't buy into the system. So again, I don't look at it from a perspective of the way it used to be was better. This is just the way it is now. So if you're an employer and you want to build something great, it's better to lean into what's important now. And if you're older and these things work for you back, then you're probably going to stick to it. And it's going to be harder to convince you that there's another better way to do things. But I think that just like athletics or technology, the way that the workplace is being run is always evolving. So why not evolve with it instead of going against the grain and trying to stick to what used to work? Why not embrace what other people have built from the ground up, and they're the testing ground, what works in a workplace, what doesn't work in a workplace. But I think being flexible as an employer, as a leader, as a company creator is one of the most important things you can do for your employees. And I think that all starts with empathy.
Very good point. And certainly in the aftermath of the COVID pandemic, people just don't want to work for a paycheck anymore. They're looking for something more. As I like to say, the greatest motivation force on the planet is meaning. People want to matter. They want their work to matter. I'm sure my listeners are getting tired of me saying this, but they're looking for a level of control and autonomy over their own destinies. And organizations have to come to recognize it. That's a big one. What can we do to involve you fully into the organization? You hear this theme all the time about we want people to feel as though they belong, right? And I say, no, I don't want them to feel like they belong. I want them to know they belong. And they
Amen.
know they belong because they're involved in the decision processes we carry out every single day here in an organization. So I think that's important to me. And that's a good point. I think you have to care for people you have to care for them. One of the ways is give them training and learning that helps them develop their careers and helps them develop their capabilities. One simple way. So I want to say we're getting close to the end here of our time together. And I want to ask you, Mike, world famous now. I suspect it's world famous, as I've had guests from all around the world. I'd like to ask you one of my favorite questions, and that is, if you had a magic wand and you could wave it at any problem or issue that you see in the world in which you live, what would that problem be, and why did you choose that?
If I had a magic wand, first of all, great question. That is a world-renowned question. My magic wand would not be that whimsical. It would just be a reminder to everyone in the world that they and only they are in charge of their own destinies. And I think we have gotten very far away from that as a society here in America, where we instead want the world around us to change and bend to our own limited beliefs. And I can't say that I have a cure for that, but I can tie it into what we just discussed in terms of empathy and culture. And that is that Jay-Z has a very, very poignant line in one of his songs, and it says, and excuse my French, "What you eat don't make me shit." And I think that people are allowed to believe and live their life however they want to. This is America. But when they want to shove down a belief system into your world without offering you the same courtesy or empathy that they are wishing from you, we're lost. And I think that starts with what we discussed, which is embrace the fact that you and only you have the power to create your own destiny. When you're starting to look for external sources to change in order to cater to, you're doing yourself a disservice, because the world is never going to see the best version of you. It's going to see the watered down version of you. And that also speaks to employees. You want the best employees? Don't think of their growth as something that's challenging your ability to keep them as employees. Encourage them to be their greatest self, because the greatest self, let's say they're graduating to become their greatest self. They're doing self-development work. They're going to the gym. They're feeling healthier. They're eating better. That employee is then coming to your place of business and making your product or service better. So why wouldn't you encourage them to be their best selves? And that goes to the government, which is always trying to cater to making things easier for people. I disagree with all my heart. That's a solution to the problem, because at the end of the day, being our best selves is the only way to make the world a better place as a whole. It's for me to be the best version of myself, be the leader that I can be, so that anybody that I come across on a daily basis, I am now the light for that person. I am somebody that changes their day. It could be in the form of a smile, a kind word, some good advice, an example of what you could overcome. People are our greatest resource, not institutions, not handouts, none of that. And I know that is a very big point of contention these days. But I think that by making things easier for human beings, we are creating weaker human beings. And by creating weaker human beings, we are creating tougher times all around.
That is a profound observation. Profound. And I want to thank you so very much for speaking your truth, because I think it resonates with a lot of people. I think it will resonate across the podcast episodes that I've done. I think you put your finger on it. People have to rise up and take responsibility for themselves and move forward. It's not going to be easy. It never is. But there's a great line. If I can pass a great line on to you, use the song, I'm going to use a movie. Okay. There's a line in Tom Hanks' movie, A League of Their Own, where he plays Jimmy Dugan, this semi-washed up alcoholic baseball manager of the women's team, during World War II. And there's a scene in it where Gina Davis, who plays the character by the name of Dottie, who's the best player on the team and probably the best player in the league. Her husband comes home from World War II, played by Bill Pullman, I believe it was. And he comes home from World War II. He's somewhat injured. And she's reunited with her husband and decides that she's going to quit baseball. And of course, this is devastating news to Tom Hanks. And in the dialogue in the movie, Tom Hanks is trying to appeal to her to stay. And he's trying to tell her, look, you're going to regret this. You're going to regret leaving. And she turns around and she says to him, Jimmy, it just got too hard. And Hanks, the alcoholic stupor clears from his face. He gets very clear-eyed and he looked at her and he says, it's supposed to be hard. It's the hard that makes it great. And I think that's something that people have to embrace. It's the hard that makes it great. And when you earn something, a word that we don't use that much anymore, it's all about deserve and not about earn. But when you earn something, it belongs to you and no one can take it away from you. So, Sean, thank you so very much for your time today. Keep doing what you're doing, man. You're doing great. Press on, as they say, and I wish you all the success in the future. Thank you for being here today on the Throttle Up Leadership Podcast.
Thank you for having me and giving me the platform, John. It's been an absolute pleasure and so many amazing words of wisdom. Thank you so much.
And thank you.